As you can obviously see, there's no projector tonight, and so we'll just be going along verse by verse rather than showing any pictures or any charts or anything of that nature. Now, as we continue tonight, Jesus, it says, on that day went Jesus out of the house and sat by the seaside. So now Jesus goes down by the sea. What sea would this be? Sea of Galilee. So he goes down by the Sea of Galilee, and he sits down there, and there was gathered unto him a great multitude. So picture this in your mind's eye. He goes down to the banks of the Sea of Galilee. There's a whole lot of people began to gather around him, so that he entered into a boat and sat, and all the multitude stood on the beach. Yes?
You're up.
We're up and going. Okay, fine. All right. Since we're up and going, I don't want to waste a good picture. There's a picture of the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus would have been going down to that shore down there somewhere. As you can see, it's not a sharp embankment of any kind. So he would go down, but since they were all gathered around him, why, he got in a boat then and pulled out a little bit, and that way he could sit in that boat and sit out there and teach the people in a more effective way. So he's starting to teach them now, and as he teaches them, it says, and he spake to them many things in parables, saying. Now, we're going to be talking about, in chapter 13, the parables of Jesus. Here is where he's going to give one parable after another in this particular chapter. Now, a parable is an easily understood illustration thrown beside a truth harder to be understood. Now, it's a physical truth which illustrates a spiritual truth. Now, I've chosen those words up there, an easily understood illustration thrown beside, because that is really what a parable is. Now, if you take a spiritual doctrine, a spiritual idea, such as the kingdom of heaven. Now, the kingdom of heaven is not like a kingdom up on this earth. It is a spiritual kingdom. It is a different kind of a kingdom. So now Jesus is going to teach us something about that kingdom. Instead of just quoting some facts and saying this and saying that, he now is going to teach us what the kingdom of heaven is like by using some illustrations. So what he does is he takes the kingdom of heaven and then he throws along beside it a physical illustration. Now the word parable actually means throw beside. So if you take a story, you throw it down beside this spiritual truth, and the story that you throw down beside this spiritual truth is an illustration. It's a physical illustration which everybody is familiar with. Now, you don't ever use a parable or an illustration that people are not familiar with. Why is it that you would never use an illustration that wasn't a very familiar everyday illustration? What would happen? You still couldn't understand it. Now then you have to explain the illustration. By the time you explain the illustration, we've forgotten what it was all about. So the parable is an illustration. It's an everyday idea. It's a true thing that everybody knows. Parables are not fictitious stories, but parables are stories that everybody are familiar with because they actually happen in everyday life. Now, Jesus is going to use these parables then to teach us various things about the kingdom of heaven. And we're going to learn some spiritual truths then about this. Now, he's going to go ahead here in just a minute, and he's going to tell us why he is teaching in parables. And he's going to say that he's teaching it so that the honest people can understand, but the evil people can't understand. Now, before he gets to that, let's go ahead and read his first parable. He started then in parables. So picture him now getting in the boat. The multitude is around him, and he just starts out like this. And he says, Behold, a sower went forth to sow. And as he sowed, some of the seed fell by the wayside. What's another word for wayside? A pathway, a roadside. It fell in the pathway of which they would be walking, and the birds came and devoured them. And others fell upon the rocky places where they had not much earth, and straightway they sprang up, because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was risen, and were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And others fell upon the thorns, and the thorn grew up and choked them. And others fell upon the good grounds, and yields fruit, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Now he that hath ears, let him hear. So I said, here's a parable. Now, if you got ears, hear. That's just another way of saying, open up your ears and listen to what I have to say. Take heed to the thoughts I have to say. Now, this is a new way of teaching. Instead of just teaching the facts and saying, now here's the way it is, it's a new method. Jesus is going to be known as the parable teacher. He's even prophesied as one who teaches in parables. No teacher has ever risen to the apex that Jesus did in teaching in parables. So look in verse 10 now, before we go any farther. And the disciples came and said unto him, Why speakest unto them in parables? Why now are you changing your method of teaching? Why are you starting to teach in parables or illustrations? And he answered and said unto them, Unto you it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. Now, there were two groups of people. There were the disciples, the honest people, and he said, now to you it's given to know the mysteries. By the way, what is a mystery? When we talk about a mystery is something that you don't understand, isn't it? But is it something that you can't understand? No. A mystery is just something you don't understand. But how do you come to understanding a mystery? It's by an explanation. When people explain it to you, you say, oh, that clears up that mystery. I see now. You see the thing I didn't see. And so mysteries are something that you don't understand now, but when it is explained to you, then you do understand it. Now, he says to you, it's given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. Now, the kingdom, when Jesus came and started teaching the kingdom of heaven, how many other people, I know you're going to say John, so let me say this. How many other people other than Jesus and John had ever taught about a kingdom other than a kingdom upon this earth? When anybody mentioned a kingdom, a king or a kingdom, how many people had talked about a kingdom that was not on this earth? This is a new concept. It's a new concept. Suppose that I told you that I have invented a new automobile. Now, everybody in here knows what an automobile is, don't you? See, we know what that is. But this automobile is not of this earth. Now, where are you? What? Do you understand what I have invented today? No. Now then it's throwing you. And you'd say, Lowell, what do you mean an automobile that is not of this earth? Well, let me explain to you now about this spiritual automobile. This automobile that operates in another realm other than on this earth. So that would take some teaching, wouldn't it? If I were going to try to explain that to you so that you would say, oh, now I understand the mysteries of Lowell's automobile. It takes some explanation. Now, when Jesus came and started teaching then, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That was his sermon. That was John's sermon. Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Now, stop to think for a moment, and we've covered this many times. What did the people in that day, what did his hearers, what did the Jews who were listening to him, what did they think when he says, now, the kingdom of heaven is at hand? What did they think? They had a concept. And that concept was that the Messiah is going to be the king of the kingdom. And where would he have his throne? It'd be in Jerusalem. What will he do? What is so important about setting up this kingdom and having this new king over the kingdom. Now, this is in the Jews' mind. What would they be thinking? Who is ruling the Jews at this time? The Romans are ruling the Jews. Now, if the Messiah comes and he sets up the kingdom here, and sets himself up in the seat of David, what obviously will he do? He'll free us, won't he? He'll free us from the captivity here, being under the domination of the Roman Empire. So they had an idea of a physical kingdom. In fact, the day that Jesus ascended into heaven, what was the last question that the apostles asked Jesus? They were all excited. They saw a lot of things happening, and he had given them spatial instructions and said, you stay right here and don't you move and you do this. And they now are really excited. And what was their question? Well, that was what the angel said, that he's going to come. See, he ascended, then the angel said he'll come the same way he left. But what did the disciples say, ask him, before he ascended? Will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? See? Are you going to set up this new kingdom again? So Israel will have its kingdom here. So still had the idea of a physical kingdom. So now Jesus' job is now to try to not just tell them the kingdom of heaven is at hand. He's not just telling them, I am the Christ, I am the Messiah, I will be the new king. But now then, let's talk about this kingdom. Let's analyze this kingdom. Let's look at this kingdom. And let me tell you something about this kingdom. This kingdom is not the kind of kingdom that you think that it really is. So he starts using these illustrations. He starts using the illustrations because he says, I want you honest people to understand it, but the people who are not honest, they won't understand it. Now, in a minute, he's going to show us about the dishonest people, what they did and so forth, and why they were dishonest. But that's the first thing that he says right here. Then he says in verse 12, for whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away that which he hath. Now, that is still explaining this. It's explaining this, and that statement is not just a statement that refers to parables, but that's a truism. What do I mean by a truism? Another truism is, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Now, Paul used that statement to teach you and me about how to help our fellow man. But let me ask you this. In how many realms is this true, other than the spiritual realm? Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. That's true in everything you can think of, isn't it? If you're farming, how you going to reap? It's in accordance with what you sow. If you sow corn, what you going to have? Sow wheat, what you going to have? Sow weeds, what you going to have? You're going to reap whatever you sow. Steve? Oh, I thought you just swatted a mosquito there. Okay, I thought you were raising your hand. Okay, you're going to reap whatsoever you sow. So if I come over to your garden this next year, and I go out there and I find some cabbage heads there, what is it that I know for sure? You planted cabbage. And so don't tell me, oh, I planted watermelon seed there and cabbage grew. No, it's whatever you sow, that will you reap. That's a truism. It's always true. Now, on this other statement, it's the same, really the same thing in every realm. And that is, whosoever hath, more will be given. Whosoever hath not, even what he has is going to be taken away from him. As you look in the financial realm, I guess that would be the best way of looking at it, who makes the most money? The rich or the poor? When the stock market goes up, who makes the most money? Is it the rich people that have a lot of money in the stock market? Or is it the poor people who don't have money in the stock market? See? So the rich is going to get richer. the poor is going to get poorer. Now, if you want to become rich, you want to get so you can make a lot of money. Every day the stock market goes up, you make a lot of money. What do? What is necessary? It's to get the money to put in the stock market, isn't it? In other words, invest it in. Because if you don't have any in, you can't make more. See, you can't make more. And so what we say is, well, I see the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. As things continue to go up, they then can go along with the escalation, but it's harder for me to buy my goods and so forth, especially if you're on a fixed income. And so in the financial realm, we see it working perfectly 100% of the time. Educationally, we see it. What happens if you and I go to school, we both learn the same thing, and you come out and you use your knowledge, and I say, okay, I've got the knowledge, now I'm not going to use it anymore. What will happen? What will happen to you? You're going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. And what's going to happen to me? I'm going to get dumber and dumber and dumber. That which I have, I will lose. I think a perfect example of that is that, as I told you since you sent me on that helicopter ride there, that when I was in the service in my 20s, I was put through the factory school in helicopters and taught helicopter mechanics. And so at that time, I knew every measurement in a helicopter. I knew every bearing. I knew everything that there was, how much play you can have laterally or vertically or any of that, right down to the hundredths of the inches or to 10,000ths of the inches and so forth. And I knew all of that. And when I got out of the service, I didn't think about helicopters anymore. I went to school. I started studying Bible. I gave myself to preaching. I didn't think about helicopters anymore. About, I don't know, 15 or 20 years later, one day Steve Voss called me up and said, hey, would you like to have a ride with one of these Cairo guys, you know, traffic reporters and so forth? Well, yeah, that'd be fun. So he said, let's go down. He said, I've got it set up for us. And so I went down. Walked out, and there's a helicopter just like I used to work on. Steve, there's the exact helicopter I used to work on. Let's look at this. We had a few minutes. Look at this. Now, and I couldn't even think of the major parts. I had a tough time. I probably got the fuselage, but you know, when you look up, I remember looking up, and that plate, you know, the blade goes around and around and around, but yet that stem, you know, stays there. Well, how does all of that work, you see up in there? Well, it's a very simple thing, and it has what's called a swash plate that is up there. So I was going to tell him how that can happen. I said, it's up there in that... I can't think of it, Steve. See that round thing that's up there? I couldn't think of it. That's like a guy not being able to think of a transmission, see, on an automobile. And you ask me a measurement, don't have it. Just what had happened to me? I knew every measurement of that helicopter. Why is it that after a few years I look at it and I don't know a thing? Because I didn't use it. See, I didn't use it. And if you don't use it properly, it'll be taken away from you. Mentally, see, that's what happened to me. See, mentally, it'll be taken away from you. Now, this is what Jesus is saying. He's saying that there's certain kinds of people out there. There's people that they see me. Now, here's the whole idea. He's not talking about finances and stuff, so let's get back on him. They see me. I'm coming along, and they hear me preach, and they see me do the works. And what would be the sensible conclusion any thinking person would have to come to when they saw Jesus walk on the water, raise the dead, do all of these things, tell them who he was? What kind of conclusion would any sensible person have to come to? He's different. He's different. Evidently, he is who he said he is. He's not just a man. Various people knew that. Nicodemus, that Ryan dealt with here the other night, knew that. They knew that there was something different in there. But even, let's take Nicodemus, of which you just covered. Ryan just covered with you. When he comes up, Nicodemus asked him, he said, we know that you're come from God. Nobody could do these works except God be with him. And then Jesus turned around and told him how you have to get into the kingdom. What did he say? Except a man be born again of the water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Put yourself in Nicodemus' shoes. What would that do? What would that do to you? How can you be born again? Get in the kingdom of heaven? Well, what do people do? This is what Jesus is saying now. This is the condition of the population at that time. They see Jesus. They know that he is more than a human. They hear his teaching about the kingdom. They hear his teaching about him being the Messiah. They see all of this evidence. What are they going to do with it? Now, the people that do the right thing, the people that take this evidence and look at it and do the right thing, they are going to know the truth. And Jesus said, when I put down these parables, you people will understand it. But the people over here, like me, who don't pay any attention to it, they don't analyze it. They are trying to get around the fact that I'm the Messiah. They're not using it properly. What will happen to them when I teach in parables? Absolutely won't make any sense whatsoever to them. And so Jesus said that I'm teaching in parables right now so that you will understand, but they won't. Therefore, I speak to them in parables, because seeing they see not. In other words, they have seen my miracles, but they haven't seen what really happened. Now, when they saw Jesus raise the dead, they could say, we saw him raise the dead. What is it that they didn't see? Seeing. They saw him raise the dead, but they didn't see. What is it that a perceptive person would see when you see him raise that dead boy? What would you see? This guy is different. This man is not just a normal human being. When they see my miracles, they really don't see what is happening. They just see the event, but they don't really see. Well, why? Well, hearing, they hear not. They've heard my sermons the same as you people have heard my sermons, he's saying. But when they hear my sermons, they don't hear my sermons. Pretty obvious. We've all done that, haven't we? We've all heard sermons, maybe happening to you right now. You're hearing. You home tonight. What Lowell teach on? I don't have any idea. Well, didn't you hear him? Well, what's your answer? Yeah, you heard him, but you didn't hear him. See? And that's what Jesus is saying right here. So they listened to what I had to say. They didn't comprehend it. They didn't understand it. Well, why in here? Verse 14. And unto them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, by hearing you shall hear, and shall in no wise understand. Seeing you shall see, and shall not perceive. In other words, you won't analyze it and see what it really is. Now, the reason why is this people's heart is waxed gross. Their heart, their mind, has a covering over it. It's waxed gross. It is rusted over. It has scum. That's what you would say. If you go out and you pick up an old pan that's been laying out in the weather for 6 years, it's waxed gross. And you'd say, well, I wonder if that's a pretty pot that I picked up. Well, you got to take the covering off of it. You got to take all the gross, terrible stuff off of it before you can understand it. Now, their mind is covered with that. Their ears are dull of hearing. Their eyes they have closed. Lest happily they should perceive with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their heart, and should turn again and I should heal them. Now, the only reason Jesus is saying that I don't heal these people is because of them. They will not hear with their ears. They will not see with their eyes. They will not understand with their mind. They've got their mind grossed over with other things. And so, I'm teaching you people in these very simple parables like this. He said, but blessed are your eyes, for they see, your ears, and they hear. For verily I say unto you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see the things which you see and saw them not, and to hear the things which ye hear and heard them not. Now this kind of throws a big responsibility on these disciples. He said, I want to tell you people something. I want to tell you how important my words are. I want to tell you how important my actions are. He said, many people. Now, who would these people be here? That many prophets and righteous men. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to name some. Who would they be? Who would they be? Who would be some prophets and righteous men that desired to see the things which you see and they didn't get to see them, and hear the things which you hear and they didn't get to hear? Who comes to your mind? Well, just name a man. Name anybody in the Old Testament. Abraham. Anybody think anybody else in the Old Testament? I don't care who you name. In the Old Testament, they didn't have the privilege of hearing Jesus Christ and seeing Jesus Christ do these things. Now, did Isaiah, did he prophesy about Christ? Yeah, he told all about Christ. Jeremiah, the prophets told about him. Abraham told about him, but they didn't get to see him. What do you suppose they would have given to have got to see Jesus come and preach and do what he did? Their whole life was wrapped up in it. I want to call your attention again over to 1 Peter. Flip over there. We need to have a little sympathy for these guys because they were the ones that really carried the ball for us and did all these wonderful things here. In 1 Peter chapter 1 and in verse 10, Peter said, concerning which salvation, now Peter said, I'm preaching to you about salvation, concerning which salvation the prophets sought and searched diligently, who prophesied of the grace that should come unto you, searching what time or what manner of time the Spirit of Christ which was in them did point into, when it testified beforehand the suffering of Christ and the glories that should follow them. So what did Isaiah, Jeremiah, Abraham, what did all of those prophets do? When Isaiah would go out and he would prophesy about the Messiah, he'd go home that night, what was on his mind? What would he think about when he went to bed? I wonder what I said today. I wonder what I meant. Today I was preaching that a virgin shall conceive and bring forth a child. I wonder. I'd like to see that happen. I wonder what I meant by that. See? And he goes ahead, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be, and then he uses some divine names. So this little boy that's going to be born of a virgin, he's going to have the government upon his shoulders. And he's not only going to be a man, but he's going to be divine. How could that be? How could that be? Could Isaiah understand that? See? How could that say? What would Isaiah have given after preaching all those years, going through all that persecution, to have been able to stand there at this time and actually see the Son of God, born of a virgin, doing these things? See? And so Jesus said, all of those people of old, they desired to hear and see what you have had the opportunity to see, but they didn't get to see them. So he's trying to show them what a blessed opportunity that was. He said, hear ye then the parable of the sower. So now then we're going to talk about the parable of the sower. All right, first of all, these are other things here that I've put up here that we'll not be dealing with right here to on that. So let's go now to the parable of the sower. Now, he starts out, and before we look in Matthew, I want you to think about Luke chapter 8 and verse 15. Now, Luke 8, Luke deals with this same parable. But Luke tells us something that Matthew doesn't tell us. And what he says is, and in the good ground are such as in a honest and good heart, having heard the word, hold it fast and bring forth. Now, what is it that Luke says? What is the ground that we're going to be talking about? See? It's the heart. See? It's the heart. By the way, up in verse 11, what's the seed? Luke tells us something else. In verse 11, what does he say the seed is? A sower goes forth to sow, and so he throws the seed out. What's the seed? The Word of God. What's the ground? What's the earth? See, in 50, it's the heart of man. So now, just like a sower goes out to sow, he's going to sow oats or wheat or whatever it is, and the way they would do it is they'd have a bag of seed, they'd pick it in there, and then they would go by and they would throw it out, and the wind would carry it, and they would sow the grain of whatever it was. So I said, now this is the way it is in the kingdom of God, that the word is going to be preached. And as the word is preached, it's just like a sower that goes out and sows seed, and sows the seed out, and it covers everything. The seed's going to cover every conceivable thing that there is out there. By the way, what does the gospel cover? In the kingdom of God, when the gospel is preached, what does it cover? How many conceivable people? What did Jesus say? Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to the honest heart. Is that right? Now, go and preach to every creature. In other words, throw this seed out on the mind of every individual. Now, if I gave you some wheat and said, go sow this wheat. You said, Lowell, where do you want it? I said, look, I've given you enough wheat. I want you to sow the earth. That's what I want you to sow. I want you to sow the earth. So you go out and you start throwing it. Would some land on the freeway? It would land on every conceivable place that you're sowing it. So that's what he's saying right in here about this thing. So there he says, when anyone heareth the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the evil one and snatcheth away that which hath been sown in his heart. This is he that was sown by the wayside. So now, if we take the wayside here, right here is a wayside. This is a path that was actually there in Jesus' day that you walked down. And so you see that you go out and you sow the grass on both sides of this thing, and some of the seed is going to land on that path. See, it's going to land on that path. Now, when it lands on that path, what will happen, you see, that's in there? So he said, now this is the way some people's mind is. Some people's mind is just like that path that's there. The people understandeth it not, just like the path doesn't grasp the seed. And now, very quickly, the evil one's going to come and snatch it away from their mind. Whatever seed falls on that path, what's going to happen? Because it's not going to go down and grab good ground and start growing. So what's going to happen? Birds are going to come. They're going to start picking at it, see? And they're going to pick it up. And so there's not going to be any seed grow then on that. So he said, now there are people like that have a mind. They hear the gospel and they don't understand it. It doesn't sink in. Well, if it doesn't sink in, how long do you comprehend it? How long do you think about it? You don't. And so finally you lose it. Then he says, then in verse 20, and he that was sown on the rocky place, this is he that heareth the word, and straightway with joy receiveth it. Now here's the difference. The first guy, the first thing here in the path, they didn't really receive it. They didn't understand it. But now here's another guy, and he understands it, and with joy he receives it. Now here again is a rocky place that's over there. Now, you notice where the grass is growing? It's not on the rocks, is it? See? It's not on it's not out there on the rocks that's there, but you see some little patches of grass that's there. And so there's a little bit of dirt, and this grass grows up just a little bit. But what kind of a crop do you get? What kind of grass do you suppose grows on that mountain? Wherever there's dirt, it's just a little bit of dirt. So the seed can catch, the seed will sprout, the plant will start to grow, but what will happen? There's not going to be much growth at all. There's a wider picture of it. It kind of gives us the reason I put this up there, it kind of gives us maybe a little different viewpoint. We say over here, well, why would you go out and sow on rocky places? If you're going to sow wheat, you go over to eastern Washington, you get all your big equipment, you plow the fields, you get all the rocks out, and then you have that nice, beautiful field. There's the field. That's the field right outside Bethlehem. It's right south of Jerusalem there. This is the kind of land Jesus is talking about. And so now as you go out and you sow, some of it's going to fall on those rocks that are out there. This, I think, is really interesting, some rocky ground. This right here is a picture that was taken from Garden of Gethsemane over to that wall over there is the wall of the temple. And right at the base of it, there's an Arab, and he has his donkey out there, and he has his plow, which is a wooden stick, what it is, and he's plowing, but he's plowing in the rocks. And so there's going to be a lot of seed fall on those rocks. By the way, they don't pick up the rocks and throw them away like you and I would. They just come up. If they can't move the rock easily there with the plow, they just plow around the rock. And so seed falls on the rock. Okay, now, when seed falls on the rock, that means it falls on a place, and there will be a little scum of dirt on that rock. So the seed will take a little root. Now, he said, that's this next kind of a man. He hears the word, he straightway accepts it with joy. This is really great. This is really great. Now, verse 21, yet hath he not root in himself, but endureth for a while, and when tribulations or persecutions arise because of the word, straightway he stumbleth. So here's a person that has just a little bit. He won't let it penetrate his mind. Now keep this in mind. We have control of our mind. A rock doesn't have any control, but we have control of our mind. We can make our mind tender if we want to. We can change our mind if we want to. But here's a guy that he has enough spirituality that he's really happy to hear the gospel and become a Christian. This is really great. But he doesn't get involved in it. You don't want to get too deep in this. And then finally, persecutions come because of the word. Somebody starts making fun of him because he's a Christian. Or he doesn't get a promotion because he's a Christian. For some reason or another, because of the word, he has problems, and he stumbles, and he falls away. Now then, the next in here then is 22. And he that was sown among the thorns, this is he that heareth the word, and the care of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and becometh unfruitful. So, here it is, you have your thorns, you have your blackberry vines, you have your weed patches there, and some of the seed falls out there in that, and the seed now really begins to grow, because it's not rocky ground, it's good ground. But the weed really begin to grow. Have you ever noticed what happens to your garden, if you have a garden like I have, that you go out, you plow it all up, it's really nice, you plant the things, you don't go back out for another 3 months, and what does it look like? What really is shining up? Are those beautiful carrots and cabbages, are they what's shining up? Or do you go out, oh, look at the weeds, see? Because the weeds are going to grow and choke them out. Now, he said that's the way that a lot of us are, that we accept the gospel. Boy, this is really great. This is really great. And so we go a whole lot longer. We go a whole lot longer than this other guy who, when he ran across a little persecution, he fell. We go through some of that stuff. We go through the persecution. But then, somewhere down the line, just like weeds overtaking our garden, the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke us out. We forget what we are. We don't give our life to God the way it should be. And there's two reasons. Now let's look at both of them. As we look, first of all, at the deceitfulness of riches, we can see very easily how that can catch an individual. What would happen to an individual if they are deceived in thinking that if I can become a rich man, if I can just become a very rich man, there's where I will find happiness. And I've heard a lot of guys say, if I could just become a very rich man, if I could become a millionaire, I would do so much for the kingdom, I would do this, I would do that, and begin to tell about that. All right. Now, a young man sets his heart on becoming rich. That's his goal, to become rich. He's a Christian. What's going to happen to him? Riches are deceitful, aren't they? As you get the riches, when you get them, very seldom ever get enough to help anybody with, because you need just a little bit more. You need just a little bit more. So there's always that deceit that is in money out there. And you justify making money by setting aside your study of the Word of God. You set aside your family life. You're not the kind of dad that you ought to be. Your children don't have the time with you. On and on it goes, because you're striving to become rich. We see the deceitfulness of riches. But let's back up now, because that's not the big problem with most of us. The big problem with most of us is the cares of this world. What's the difference in the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches? Suppose a person is not striving to be rich. Just a common, ordinary individual trying to get along in everyday life. What do you find when you're trying to get along in everyday life? The cares of this world are pretty tough, aren't they? Taxes going up. Inflation comes along. All of a sudden you get a new bill from Monroe for your water. My water has gone up from $69 to $169 in the last 2 or 3 years. It just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. I get a raise every year on Social Security. It just comes in automatically, January 3rd every year. And so my first time I got the raise, it was $20. I got this raise, $20 a month. And then the next week, I got a little notice, your insurance is going up $20. See? Okay? So the next year, I got a $13 raise. And I got another notice and says, your insurance is going up another $20. And then this last year, I got, I think, $16 raise or something, and my insurance went up $40. Now, how do you get along on that? See? So you start looking at it, you say, what am I going to do? Now, if that's the only income you got, if you're in fixed income, do you have any cares of this world? See? And even if you're not on fixed income, do you have any cares of this world? See? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to do this? My car breaks down. Oh, yeah, had that to happen here the other day. Yeah, car breaks down. Only took $505, and then that didn't fix it, and so I had to go back for another $150. And cares of this world. How are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to do this? We all face this, see? We all face this. Now, can you get caught up in the cares of this world of how to keep your job and how to pay your bills and set Christ aside? That's what Jesus is saying. So there's that guy. Now here's the last guy. And he that was sown on the good ground, this is he that heareth the word and understandeth it, who verily beareth fruit. This guy grows and he grows until he can bear fruit, until he becomes the kind of person God would have him to be, until he bears that fruit of the Spirit, joy, happiness, contentment, doing away with gossip and vengeance and doing away with the evil things and putting the good things in his life and talking to people and converting people and a good influence. And so he's bearing fruit in here. And it says, he bringeth forth fruit, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. They say we all don't have the same abilities, just like all farms don't have the same abilities. Farmers will talk, how many bushels of corn did you get? Well, I got, so many. And this guy, well, I didn't get quite that many. Well, it's because of the ground and the surrounding things around it that's there. So some people are able to bring forth 100, some 60, some 30. But what is it that all of these people with good ground, good heart, what is it that they all have in common? It's not that I do as much as you do, but what is it that you and I have in common? I'm a 30-fold guy, somebody else is a 60, and you're 100. What is it we have in common? All of us are bearing fruit. See? We're all bearing fruit. Now, this is the first lesson that Jesus teaches us. In the kingdom of heaven, this is what counts. The thing that counts is that people will hear my word, let it permeate their mind, and then bear fruit by becoming the kind of person that I would have them to be. So that's the kind of citizen that he wants in the kingdom of God. Now, he'll continue on with more parables then in chapter 13, but there's where we close tonight.